All right, guys, my name is Ryan. This is going to be a very long video about Voltage Sec and pretty much everything that Voltage Sec does and why I designed it and how you can use it to make incredible music. All right. It is a video manual, so it's going to be pretty long on the long side, but I'm going to divide it into 4 sections. The first section, I'm going to go on a little rant about my history, why I made Voltage Sec. I mean, why make a plugin? There are so many plugins that do so many things. But I really believe that Voltage Sec has some unique capabilities. So I'll lay out how those capabilities are achieved through some of the circuitry. If you're not into that and you don't want to hear the rant, that's completely fine. Skip ahead to the second part. That's where I'm going to start laying out the basic functions, showing you how to get it into key, how to make different patterns with it, how to use the range function, which is the main feature, as I'll explain. And then we're going to get into, in part 3, we're going to get into the pattern sequencer, going beyond a single pattern into making full arrangements with Voltage Sec and sequencing entire songs, which again is not only possible, but actually pretty easy and intuitive. And then in the final part, we'll get into MIDI out, so how you can use Voltage Sec to sequence and connect to either external hardware or internal VST instruments. And then, of course, things like splitting the 2 voices into different buses and all the routing stuff that you can do technically to get things like, if you want to process the 2 voices independently and things like that. All right. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. All right, guys. In part 1, as I said, I'm just going to go talk a little bit about some of the circuitry in Voltage Sec and how it's designed and how that ultimately leads to the unique compositional possibilities that it can produce. All right. So firstly, just a little bit of my history and why and how I built this. I've been using MIDI and teaching MIDI and music theory basically my whole life since I was 19 years old. And I'm very lucky to head up an audio institute in Africa, where I've got hundreds of students studying specifically electronic and modern music. And this creates a really awesome melting pot of different knowledge exchanges. And, we've got hundreds of people obsessed with synthesis and synthesizers and the different things that they do. And I'm very lucky that I get to do this all day long, right? I've been playing with MIDI, as I said, for 25 years. And then about 7 years ago, I had a modular revolution. And there was something about modular. Most people get into modular for the sound design. But I got into modular because I thought it was such an amazing compositional tool and underrated. You never really hear people say, wow, I think modular is an amazing compositional tool. What I hear people saying, oh, you can make all these cool sounds and I can wire the 14th LFO into the ADSR. And again, that's cool. But what I found incredible about modular is the compositional thing, all right? Now, let me get into a little diagram over here, and I'll try and put this in post, about what the idea is, right? In modular, you take a sequence, right? So let's say we've got 0 volts down the middle, and everything's obviously in volts in modular. And then we make a shape. So let's say we've got the shape in the corner here, and that shape has like high notes and low notes, all right? Now, if it's a quantized sequence, each node on the sequencer is going to represent a fixed note, okay? So already sequencing is cool because you can dial in little, values, and you can sort of make a melody in a more, I guess, visual way, a more intuitive way, all right? But typically the sequence is already quantized, okay? So each position on the sequencer, each slider, the value represents a specific pitch. This one might be C if we're in C minor, D sharp, A sharp, G, blah, blah, blah. All right. Now, this is already very interesting, but what's much more interesting is if you leave that sequence unquantized, okay, and then you put it through a VCA before it hits the quantizer. Now, that's a novel addition to the circuitry, but it's a massive behavioral change, particularly in terms of melodies or melodics, because let's say again that we have the shape and it's unquantized. Now it comes through the range and it comes through the VCA and it goes to a quantizer. Now when the VCA is at full range, that shape will correlate to a certain set of notes, all right? But as we lower the level of that VCA and we allow less range through, the signal is going to start quantizing or correlating to a different series of notes, okay? And that means that you can, A, make an initial shape and use this range function to scale through the sort of amount of available voltage until you get a melodic idea or a voicing, if you will, that you like, okay? That's on the basic level. The sort of more advanced level is you can scale that range over time, and you can create evolving melodic variations or evolving voicings of melodies by simply using this really basic tool, which is just running the damn sequence through a VCA before it hits the quantizer, okay? The way I think about this is like an amplifier for your melody, and that's literally what it is. Now, I'm not going to go on a whole rant, but the other thing I like about modular is that you can decouple the gates or the triggers, the when message, the note on, if you will, and the pitch. And that's another sort of approach that I've tried to implement in Voltage Sec, because in one way you have the gates on one channel and you have the pitch on another channel, and the pitch can be manipulated independently of those note triggers and gates. All right. If you guys want to hear a more detailed video about it, I'm happy to post one. But for now, let's just get into it, all right? So that's my rant and a little example of how the circuitry works. And if you go to a full sort of diagram, you'll see that this concept is repeated twice in Voltage Sec. So you have sequencer 1 coming in through a VCA, which we call the range control, and then to a quantizer, which again can be modulated to different keys and modes, including Lydian, Dorian, Mixer Lydian, all the modal scales. And then it's happening again in a second voice, again, sequencer, VCA, quantizer, and you can play those two voices in harmony with each other, in complementary and counterpoint, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So yeah, all the circuit diagrams are done. I am going to switch my view over, and I'm going to get into part 1, so let's go.